I want to ask you how this Tennessee defensive front compares to the one that won a national championship in 1998. So just first, big picture view, and then we can kind of discuss the players that will ultimately determine our opinions. Just big picture view. What do you think?
I think the 98 front four defensive line was really good. This front four is really good. I actually think that this defensive line is deeper and thus more talented than the 98 defensive line. The 98 defensive line was really good, but I don't remember the 8th and 9th and 10th players on that team being able to come in and you don't lose. This group is deeper than the 98 defensive line.
Wow, strong stuff, Caleb.
Jimmy, okay, so I half agree because I think they're deeper. I'm with you. But would you take this group of starters over the 98 defensive line? And I mean, keep in mind, you're talking Darren Walker, Sean Ellis, two longtime NFL players. Sean Ellis, as good of an NFL player as Leonard Little was. And I know there's James Pierce, but would you take the starters of this team and say they could compete with the 98 defensive line?
Probably not, but it's close. It's really close.
Look,
I think Pierce could do what Ellis has done as an NFL player. Darren Walker was a longtime NFL player. Can norman-lott, who doesn't start, could he have a career like that? Maybe. Amari Thomas is not as good as I don't think as Darren Walker was. You got Corey Terry. I think Tennessee is plenty good enough to match what Corey Terry was able to do. So I would take the 98 starters, but I don't think there's a significant difference. Like if I rated the 98 starters a 10, I wouldn't rank this group a 7. I'd put them up there around an 8 or a 9.
Wow. It's funny that you say that about norman-lott. Somebody told me just recently, he said that's the guy to watch out for. And he's not starting, and we know that Josh Heupel loves gamesmanship, but I kind of wonder if he might end up being their best interior player. And we're saying this, and there's a debate among like 5 guys.
Well, I know that Rodney Garner at one point said Bryson Eason had unlimited potential. So he likes him a lot, and he's played well. I think the best pass rusher on the interior is norman-lott. He had about 6 sacks a year ago, and he got after NC State as well. I think he is their best interior guy. I think he's their best defensive tackle production-wise. And I think he can play in the NFL. I think Thomas can play in the NFL, but I don't think he's going to be a great player. And I think that I think Eason has NFL potential too. So, I mean, these guys, they're not slacks now. These guys can play. So I like them. But again, I give the edge to 98.
I want to offer this up too. Elijah Simmons, if he can stay healthy, may be the best combination of size and explosiveness. He just can't stay healthy.
No, he can't. And I was one that always felt like he needed to lose some weight to improve his mobility and agility inside.
Right.
I don't know that he's reached his potential yet. Maybe eventually he will. I mean, some players, it takes them a long time to reach their potential. Maybe this wasn't his fault, but I'm reminded of Robert Ayers. Robert Ayers started 1 year at Tennessee on the defensive line, right? And he was a first-round draft pick. So did that mean that he wasn't a great player until his senior year? Did it mean other players ahead of him were really good? You could debate that. But I do think that Tennessee's got a pretty. I think Simmons has the potential. I see him more as a run stopper than I do somebody that can get after the quarterback. But I do think he's a solid player.
Jimmy's Appearance brought to you by Varner Ford. Please check them out, and also because they got great selection of the best prices. But also, I need you to hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't to this point. Hit like and subscribe, Caleb.
All right, so Jimmy, let's play a little fun. Let's have a little fun here because something Dave has said for a long time, and I don't know if you subscribe because I actually disagree with him, but he has said the 99 team was more talented than the 98 team. I disagree because of Al Wilson, but let's talk about the 99 defensive line versus this year because the 99 defensive line had Darren Walker and Sean Ellis and also John Henderson and Albert Hainsworth. So at that point, which one are you taking?
99. The 99 defensive line starters were the best of any defensive line that I can recall at Tennessee.
I would agree with that. Any in between, there's some lean years in there.
Lean.
Yes. Like scissor. Jamarcus Russell.
There certainly were. And I'll say this, I don't remember all the depth they had in 99, but those starters, and it's funny how I've talked to various people that'll, buddy mine in Florida, one in Louisiana, talk about, man, that 98 defensive line with Henderson and Hainsworth. I'm like, no, they didn't play. Now, Henderson was, if I remember, a Prop 48. Hainsworth hadn't arrived yet. So they were not players on the 98 team. But when you look at 99 and what those guys, I mean, how good they were, one of them wins the Outland Trophy Award. Both of them were outstanding NFL players. Hainsworth, I think, was the first defensive tackle to sign, $100 million contract. Those guys were great players.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Jimmy, this year, do you think it's possible though that this year's team could actually have, maybe not like, you're right. I mean, that was three great players, Henderson, Hainsworth, and Sean Ellis, plus another NFL starter, and Darwin Walker. But do you think this year's team could have more, not great players, but more NFL players? I mean, we talk about James Pierce as a great player, but then you mentioned norman-lott, Amari Thomas, Jackson Moy is getting in there on some plays sometimes. I mean, do you think this team could, and Dominic Bailey, Tyree West, do you think this team has more NFL players, if not as many great players?
Probably. I wouldn't be surprised if 6 or 7 of them get drafted. Kind of cut out a little bit. Did you mention Joshua Joseph? I think he's a guy that can get drafted.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even mention him.
And then, I mean, if you go down the list, Devin Hobbs, is he a guy that could be drafted? Possibly. I think they got 6 or 7 guys that could be drafted in the NFL. I think Simmons is going to get drafted. So, yeah, I think this might have more NFL drafted defensive linemen than any Tennessee team ever.
Wow. I think you're right. And, you know, what's funny, Caleb, yeah, you were going to ask something. Well, I don't think we've even seen James Pierce's name to this point.
No, we haven't. James Pierce.
Well, I mentioned his name earlier, comparing him to Ellis.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And also, but I mean, and Jimmy, I wanted to throw in, talk a little more. What do you think of my take? I mean, we just saw him block a punt, but you can't simulate that athleticism. Or you can't. That athleticism was not deceptive. Do you think there's a chance Jordan Ross is as good as James Pierce in the future?
Maybe. And that's another player that's going to be drafted, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you just go down the list of this group, I do like Ross's potential. I think it looks like he's got all the attributes to be a tremendous defensive lineman. So could he be as good as Pierce? Maybe. That's down the road now. We need to see a little bit more. But I'm also reminded that in their first year, Joseph's was better than Pierce. In their second year, Pierce was way better than Joseph's. Now Joseph looks like he's coming on, and we'll see. But to your point about Ross, I think he has the ability to one day be a great player for Tennessee.
We can talk NIL all day long, but I think this speaks to Josh Heupel's recruiting ability, because he went to these defensive linemen, and my thinking was they're not going to want to play for him because they'll have to play 80 plays a game. And he went to them and said, we're going to have so many people. It's going to be fresh, and you're going to be good, and it's going to be vertical, and you're going to be able to rush the passer because we'll have the lead. I've heard a lot of recruiting sales pitches from a lot of different coaches over the years, Jimmy. I thought that one was total BS. I was like, they're never going to have that depth to be able to do that, and players are going to be tired. But he was right. I think it speaks to his recruiting pitch and his ability.
Yeah, I looked this up. I actually teams did not run an inordinate number of plays against Tennessee last year.
Really?
Are there a couple of games along the way where defense played a lot of snaps? Yes, but God, I think they've had 59 snaps in one game this year. I can't remember what NC State had. It wasn't a whole lot. But to the point, here was a stat that I saw that's pretty interesting. Tennessee's defensive line, the players averaged 20 snaps a game. That's the fewest in the SEC. Arkansas, their defensive linemen average 44 snaps a game. So, in my opinion, when you look at what they're doing, and that, it speaks to their depth and to their philosophy, but we talk about Tennessee's up-tempo offense wearing out a defense. Tennessee's defensive line wears out an opposing offensive line because you don't substitute that much on the offensive line, right? So those guys are facing a new front four and then a new front four, and then they trade out a new front four, and all these guys can play. And I think that's one of the secret sauces to this defense is that they wear out the opposing offensive lineman. And I'll be curious to see what happens as far as the opponent scoring in the second half. I don't think it's going to be a lot, even though sometimes if you're up by 50, you may give up a garbage score here or there. But so far, Tennessee really hasn't done that.
All right. Jimmy is one of the most objective guys that I know, if not the most objective. He gave you some pretty good stuff there on where he thinks Tennessee stands up against the all-time best defensive lines, and it's right up there.